My name's Morgan Christopher, and I'm a senior at Albright. And this is a story called Rumpelstiltskin. There was once a poor miller, and he had a beautiful daughter. And one day he met the king, and he was talking to the king about his daughter, and he was trying to seem important. So he told the king that his daughter was able to spin straw into spools of gold. And so this intrigued the king, so he invited the daughter to his castle, and when she arrived, she was taken to a chamber filled with straw and a wheel, and was told to spin all of the straw into spools of gold by morning or else she would die. So he leaves her here, and she begins to cry, and as she's crying, a little man appears in the doorway and asks her why she's crying, and she explains her situation. And he says, if I spin all of the spools into gold for you, what will you give me in return? She says, I'll give you my necklace. So he takes the necklace and spins all of the straw into gold. And in the morning when the king comes back, he's pleased, but he's still greedy, so he takes her into an even larger room and again tells her, if you value your life, you will spin all of this into gold by morning. So she begins to cry again. And once again, the little man appears in the doorway and says, if I offer you my assistance, what will you give me in return? She says, I'll give you the ring that's on my finger. So he takes the ring and he begins to spin all of the straw into gold. And in the morning when the king comes back and all of it was done, he was shocked. And he took her into an even larger room that was filled with straw, and said, if you are able to spin all of this by morning, I will make you my wife. And she starts crying. She doesn't know what she's going to do. And the little dwarf appears again in the doorway and says, I'll help you again, but what will you give me in return? And she says, I have nothing left to give to you. And he says, well, if you become queen, I want your firstborn child. And she says, she's really not thinking that this would ever happen, that she could become queen, so she agrees. She doesn't know what else to do, so she does agree. And he spins all of the gold, or all of the straw into gold for her once again. And in the morning when the king came back, he took her as his wife. And they had a big, beautiful wedding, and they had many happy times, and the king ended up not being such a bad guy. They fell in love, and within a year they had a child. Well, soon after the child was born, the dwarf came back in search for what he was owed. And she was so upset by this, she had forgot, and so she offers him all of the riches of the kingdom, and he says, no, nothing is more valuable to me than a human. So she begins to cry so much, and he's frustrated by this, and he says, I will leave you 3 days to consider. If you can, in that time, discover my name, then you shall keep your child. And so the queen starts thinking about all of the names that could possibly be his name, and the next day he comes back to her, and she says many different names, and each name he says, that is not my name. So she sends out a messenger into the town to think of all of the strangest names that they could think of and uncommon names. And so the next day when he came back to her, she then said all of these other uncommon names, and he, for each one, said, that's not my name. And on the third day, the messenger came back to the queen and said, I was traveling through the woods, and in a high mountain near the forest, he found a house, and there was a fire burning inside, and he saw a little man jumping around a fire, and he was singing a song, and the song said, today I stew, and then I bake, tomorrow I shall the queen's child take. How famous it is that nobody knows that my name is Rumpelstiltskin. And the queen was very, very happy to hear this, and when the dwarf came back, he says, now, lady, what is my name? And she first comes up with a couple of different names, and he says no to each one, and then she goes, "Are you called Rumpelstiltskin?" And he's so shocked that she figured out his name that he calls her a witch, and he stomps his foot into the ground so hard with rage that he couldn't pull it out again. And he took a hold of his leg with both of his hands, and he pulled so hard that the right one came off while he was struggling, and he hopped away in pain, howling. And to this day, the queen never heard from him again. And that was a story that I was told as a child, and I always enjoyed it.